Friday. This is the last Friday this month of July. It is the 30th today of July 2021. And of course, just to say thank you so much and welcome to Pan-African Friday today. Now, joining me in studios are the usual Pan-African panelists. But I'll start with our guest in studios, Mr. Otuko Augustine, who is a researcher at the National Resistance Movement Secretariat. You're very welcome, Ndugu Otuko.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much. Happy to have you, and thank you so much for joining us in studios. Of course, together with my team of Pan-Africanists in studios here is James Mututa. Karibu.
Yeah, asante.
Thank you very much. And Ndugu Akola Mazima, pia karibu.
Asante sana.
It was on this day in 2005 that General Garang actually died, and 14 altogether, and 13 others. It was on this day, about how many years? 16 years ago? 16 years ago. On a very light note from all of you, as we remember, the late General John Garang, who died on this day after a helicopter crash. He had actually just been sworn in as first vice president of Sudan, and days later died. In just maybe 2 minutes for all of you, how do we think that shaped or is shaping the politics, the history, and the life of the people now in that country called South Sudan? Otuko.
Well, I think it was very unfortunate that a liberator, a very visionary leader of that sort, could die in such an incident before accomplishing the mission of giving strategic direction for the country.
After 2 decades of struggle.
After 2 decades of struggle. And I think all the challenges that came thereafter was an indication that Garang did not complete his work. He needed time to have completed the work that he had started. Unfortunately, he passed on before. So to me, I think his death was quite unfortunate for the people of South Sudan, but also for the people of Africa at large.
Yeah. Okay. Ndugu Akol, on John Garang?
Well, on General Dr. John Garang Dimabiol, I think really when it was so sad that he died, actually before accomplishing his mission. And his death reminded me the death of Samora Machel, because Samora Machel was also died when really the nation and the African continent still really needed him. So his death, as Otuko was saying, really, of course, what followed is that the people who took up after him, unlike Mozambique, where we saw Chisano almost shared the same vision with Samora Machel. In South Sudan, I think, I'm sorry to say this, but which is the truth, is that General Salva Kiir actually, I think they really did not share the same vision. So he was not oriented in the vision of Dr. John Garang. That's why you see we've had the mess that actually has come up. Because I believe if Dr. John Garang was alive, these tribal clashes would not have been there. And also, it is said, because I was privileged to attend some of the conferences where Dr. John Garang presented papers, and he was not in for the secession of South Sudan. He was in for a united Sudan where both the black and the Arabs actually coexist and enjoy the same rights as citizens of a united, free Sudan.
The principle of live and let live. Yes. Coexistence. Okay. Mututa. Garang today, 16 years later, and he is the youngest African nation, African country, that from the time they got their independence, they've gone through all this time. Actually, they celebrated their 10th anniversary of independence just recently, but yet again, it's one thing to celebrate independence, but it's also another thing to actually work and behave like an independent state. We've seen this happening. But John Garang died today, 16 years ago.
When John Garang died, in fact, the reflection of John Garang is becomes so fresh in my mind. I was part of the party that escorted John Garang to the airport. Vice President then, Professor of Kenya, is the one who saw off Garang at the airport. In fact, Beckham, a colleague from protocol officer from Foreign Affairs, said, James, can't we go to Sudan and come back now that we have a chopper dropping off Garang and we come back?
You wanted to also get on board?
Then I said, but I could be having other things in Kampala to do. I said, but we have time now. Now the work is finished, because he had we had this hectic time when he was here. I'm like, no, I think I will not go. There was that possibility of traveling on that chopper, and we had also another colleague who was the hostess and who was also working as household to Garanga, because Garanga didn't come with his team. So we saw off Garang from the airport. The vice president saw him off Entebbe, and he went. That evening, I got a message from the protocol officer, Mr. Mtabaz, from our office, and was saying, have you heard this information that the chopper has gone missing? In fact, I thought it was a joke. I'm like, a chopper is not a piece of cake that can go missing.
It disappears because somebody has chewed it away. Somebody has eaten it away.
And it becomes so serious that we later on heard that actually the chopper has gone missing from the radar, and that by the following day, I think it was the American cable news that were telling us that Garang had actually crashed, because I think they had information ahead of any of us. But like a call was saying, I think the death of Garang brought a new chapter, maybe a nasty one, in the history of South Sudan, but also the rest of Africa, because the conflict has now splashed beyond Sudan. As Uganda, we have been involved with refugees and the other neighboring countries, of course. So the only thing which I also find, like I said, many people think otherwise, but it is also, we can believe that, and appreciate that it's a new state, and it needed a person, a dramatic leader like Garang, to help put together the people of Sudan. But I think the preparedness was also a problem, that when that vacuum that was created could not be easily filled by the other leaders who were with Garang. Now that also becomes a problem of the system. And I was listening to Ambassador Arkan, who opened this show, when she was saying that replacing an African leader with another one is not the solution, because as long as the system remains, the same president is going to have the same problems and the same problems and the same problems. So what we need to look at are the structures that are responsible for the democratization and the development of our continent as Africa. So if that had happened, that the time Garang died would have been so easy to fill in the gap. You will not have the same person, but the system should have provided the answers to most of the questions that are lingering up to today.
Okay, well, that's very important. Thank you, gentlemen, for the thoughts, of course, that you have about John Dimabio Garang and of course, that country called South Sudan. But yet again today, before we get into the issues that we're talking about, we're also expecting to be joined here on Zoom by two friends or two comrades who are not young, but in the diaspora. We would love to call it so. We'll be joined later by Miss Joy Chakwita. She's a lawyer, and she is based in the UK. She'll be talking to us later. We're trying to get the connection to her, and of course we'll also have Mr. KDOB Awadu. Mr. Kedi Obi Awadu is also a researcher, and he'll be talking to us from the United States of America as we discuss and talk about the diaspora and Africa's development. And I think here is Awadu with us. If you can hear us, we can see you. You have a very good and clean picture. We just hope that your sound is equally good. Speak back to us and we know that you can hear us.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here with you for Pan-African Friday on UBC. I've long looked forward to being able to be with you on this station.
Okay, well, very lovely and very wonderful. We have a very good and clean image of yourself, and of course your audio is also perfectly good. Just keep it there for all the time that we're going to be together. Thank you.
Even water.
And surprisingly, the comment has come in here. How did you know we're going to put on this color and you also put on the same? Have you seen us and then run home to put on the same attire just like us?
Yes.
Well,
brilliant minds think alike.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're also expecting to be joined here by Joy Chakwita, who is in the UK. But just before we get to Ndugu Obi Awadu, today we also are having celebrations here of the Pan-African Women Day, and of course the Pan-African Women Organization last year elected unanimously Miss Joyce Kabayo, who is now the Secretary General. She's our own here, and of course she's the convener of this meeting that is happening at Kololo. Just another 2 minutes on the Pan-African Women's Day that is celebrated here today at Kololo, where we expect His Excellency the President of Uganda to preside over as guest of honor. Ndugu Mtuta.
Yeah, they had a prayer event with the Vice President who was meeting the group, the organizers of this meeting, which is going to be virtual at Kololo, and like you said, which is going to be attended by the President. Now, this virtual thing is also becoming a problem. It reminds me of what was happening in the week when my friend Lazarus Chakwera, the President of Malawi,
Lazarus Chakwera,
yes, had to travel to London to go and attend to attend a virtual meeting. and when he was asked
yes.
on BBC, and he was saying, I came with a delegation of 10 people, of course minus the Minister for Foreign Affairs, and he was asked, why didn't you come along with the Minister of Foreign Affairs? He said, yeah, but the people I came with are from Malawi, and they are equally important.
Exactly.
That was including his wife and his daughter. Now, but these are some of the issues of Africa. His argument earlier, which was published in the New York Times, said that he had to travel to London because the internet network in Malawi is bad. So there was no way he could attend the virtual
meeting with broken internet back home. And if you notice, President Lazarus Chakwera is one of the African presidents who is, I think, modeled after the man, Dr. John Pombe Joseph Magufuli. He really loved the way Magufuli was doing his things, and if Magufuli was here today, I think they would disagree on that particular one.
Exactly.
Of flying to out of Malawi to go and do that Zoom meeting. Otuko, in just 2 minutes, then we go to we go to issues today.
Thank you very much. I think the African woman or the African women contribution in the liberation struggles of Africa has not been clearly documented. And yet, women have played a very pivotal role, right from the pre-colonial time to post-colonial time. When you look at the colonial struggles in Nigeria, in South Africa, in East Africa here, you will actually realize that women played a very key role that somehow was discounted because of being women. A lot was not talked about them, and yet they played a very key role. Even within NRM, if you look at the NRM liberation struggle, women played a very critical role in the bush, but little is documented about them. The stories are being told by women themselves. If you met these women who were in the bush with the NRA, you'll actually realize that they played a very critical role in ensuring that the war successfully, the rebellion successfully succeeded. In my view, the first take home for the women today as they celebrate is to ensure that their history in the liberation of the African countries should clearly be documented and projected, so that let the world know the contribution of the African woman in matters of transformation and liberation. Then the second thing is that the women should actually be, there is a question that is always asked, the appointment, this affirmative action in Africa, does a political position provide an avenue for women empowerment? And I think that question should be addressed by women themselves. If the question of political appointments or political positions does not address the question of affirmative action, then the African women should clearly indicate to us, the Africans, that this is our role as in matters of transformation, because our agenda should be to transform Africa from where it is to a better Africa. And I think the women will play that critical role.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's very important. Ndugu Akol, please say something about that, because the event is happening today, and it's anchored on a theme of financial inclusion, the challenges and opportunities of what's happening. But it's also anchored on echoing a new year of the African woman, 2020, 2030, new decade actually, of the African women. And of course, like he says, quite a number of things. We talk about these issues when we tend to look at a few political figures in places of leadership, and we think, yes, that's the empowerment of the African woman. But yet again, we still see some disparities here and there. Talk about that very briefly, then we get into issues this morning.
Well, I must say that on my side, I really celebrate the achievements of the African woman, because when you look at the traditional setting, the role of the women, the role of the woman was very, very, very clear and well appreciated. But when the Mzungu, the colonialist, came, he turned our culture upside down and came in with a formal education that segregated the woman. And when the formal education of the Mzungu segregated the woman, again they imposed it on the African culture, that the Africans do not value the girl child. Yet it was their own education that was doing that, because traditionally, women were respected, valued, and so on. So this really, I think, it shows that yes, women have woken up, have realized the truth that it is not the African culture, it was the formal education, and I'm happy that they have actually rolled up their sleeves. They have worked hard to make sure that they really catch up with their male counterparts in as far as getting opportunities. Now back to Uganda, I think President Yoweri Museveni has still demonstrated that actually he's one of those leaders that champion the women emancipation, because you look at the cabinet itself, and this I think should be one of the cabinets on the continent that really has given women an opportunity to serve society.
Okay. Well, very important. Now, you saw, producer, you showed you what is happening today at Kololo, the 59th anniversary of the Pan-African Women's Day. It's being the host today, Uganda, and remember it was in February last year in Namibia, in Windhoek, when Alice Kabayi was actually voted for unanimously, or elected unanimously as the Secretary General of that. Now, it's not open to all the public. Remember, we've now changed to virtual meetings and virtual celebrations. So, because you've seen that, don't start now hovering to Kololo.
Like Chakwera.
Like Chakwera, to say we've come here to celebrate this virtually. Well, coming to Ndugu KDOB, Awadu, in the US where you are, it's morning to us here in Kampala, Uganda, East Africa. We thank you so much. Let's get into our discussions today, and we want to talk about the diaspora and Africa's development. Now, there is a belief that the highly educated African immigrants, wherever they are, possibly have not impacted so much on the development of the African continent. In all ways, talk about the economics, talk about the politics, talk about the social lives and all the things. Let's start with you, then we'll also share thoughts from where we are. Welcome, and let's get speaking.
It's a pleasure to be with you. This topic you picked today is so critically important. As a diaspora-born African, I myself am very much committed to seeing a paradigm shift with regard to the way, the manner that Africans outside of the continent are able to channel more and more developmental resources. There are a couple of critical points I want to make just really at the beginning of this, that this narrative that we call Africa Rising, it needs continuous tangible inputs for us to be expected dividends that it promises. Point, we need a unified response to this COVID-19 pandemic and other disruptive forces of the present and the future. There is a book out now by the founder of the Davos Group, the World Economic Forum. The book is called The Great COVID-19 Global Reset. And I think it's very critical that Africans begin and accelerate these dialogues as well. A couple more points. There is a need to prepare for the year 2050 when it is anticipated that the world will be presented a unified, federated Africa, which has the potential to perhaps be the greatest empire in world history. And last point, we, the African diaspora, must do a much better job of collaborating with our continental comrades, collaborators, brothers and sisters about informing, inspiring, and exciting our audience to individual and collaborative actions that will bring about this unification and empowerment, sustainable development for our mother continent.
Well, you talked about COVID-19 and, of course, our response. And we just noticed also that this is a time that the continent is also very challenged. We've gone through virtually now 2 years of the pandemic, and we're realizing, scientists are telling us that the only way to get back to normal life is by vaccinating. And you notice that as we speak today, we have less than 5% of the continent of Africa vaccinated, and we are all stranded looking at the rest of the world to come in and salvage and help us. Let's hear from you, the Africans who are not with us here, the Africans in the diaspora. What are you doing, or what do you think needs to be done for you to help the continent of Africa go through this pandemic in as far as vaccination is concerned, which is the way now to go? Katie?
Yes. I have a very controversial position on the vaccination. Just this week, I was banned from YouTube for a week for posting up a scientifically based analysis quoting numerous peer-reviewed journals questioning, and where the scientists themselves questioning the validity of this COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Now, so I'm going to limit what I say here because it is extremely controversial. I have created a white paper, and I'm the author of 4 books on vaccines. I know I have over 3 dozen books out, over 4 books on vaccines alone. I'm about to re-release one of my earlier books, which talks about the history of human experimentation with vaccines, unlicensed experimental vaccines, especially one very sinister study which took place in the late 1980s and was published in the British medical journal, The Lancet, about a test in Senegal with an unlicensed vaccine, Edmundston Zagreb high titer measles vaccine. And very interesting, in the 5 to 41 months after this vaccine experimentation, 1 out of every 13.3 babies died of non-specific opportunistic infection. Again, that is a description of what is commonly called AIDS. My new paper that I published now, since this COVID vaccination has begun, this paper was published in December 2020, and it talks about the risks of unintended consequences by the use of these new gene therapies. And again, when we're talking about COVID-19, according to the definition of a vaccine, it is not a true vaccine. These are gene therapies, admittedly so, including both the mRNA injections, or jabs as we would call them, as well as the adenoviral injections. Both of these are intended to change human DNA for all time. For some of us, this is too risky. There are not enough controls in place for this, and it does have a bad historical record of causing unintended amino acid sequence changes.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. You've heard from Obi in the US, and of course what Yaba's about that. Akol, come in first.
Well, thank you very much. Well, coming to the topic of the diaspora and African development, personally, I want us to take it back to the struggle for independence. Because the struggle for independence actually was started by the people in the diaspora, those who had gone to study. And specifically, I'll talk about the 1945 Manchester Pan-African Conference, where you find that the conveners, we had Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, we had Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, we had also Du Bois. Du Bois is one of actually the great Pan-Africans from, from the US. And actually he inspired people like Martin Luther King, like the likes of the Malcolm X. He inspired most of them, and really you can see now the Obamas are products actually of the struggles that were begun by the Du Bois. So what we are celebrating today, even what is happening in Kololo, is as a product of the people in the diaspora, that really when they went to study abroad, the likes of Dr. Nadi Azikiwe in Nigeria, where he started the dream to liberate Nigeria at the University of Pennsylvania in the US. So that's now the diaspora, that when they were there, went for studies, they realized that no, we have to get back home and liberate our country. So we can say kudos for that that breed of Africans who went to the US, sponsored actually by the colonial, to abroad, sponsored by the colonial governments, but when they got there, they developed the urge and the need to liberate their countries. But I think as a continent, as Africans, we have failed to come up with to get a paradigm shift, because Pan-Africanism was anchored and built on African socialism. And of course, we are now living in a world where really capitalism has really overshadowed the socialism and communism. So there is a need to there is a need to dialogue and come up with a paradigm shift from African socialism to African capitalism. I think that is the crisis. That how do we move from, because when you look at the theme of today, the women in Kololo, it's all about capitalism. It's all about how financial inclusion. How do we as Africans, of course, like the other time we're talking about South Africa. In South Africa, now the problem is how do these Africans get into what we call African capitalism? I think that is now that is the crisis. Okay, moving from African socialism now to African capitalism.
Okay, just hold it there. I am told that Joy is also in now. Joy Chakwita is an immigration lawyer and social worker in London. Can you hear us, Joy? Hello, Joy. I've just been told you're also on now. Let's know whether you are there, Joy. We want to engage you.
Yes, good morning. I can hear you, all of you. I can hear you. Good morning.
Okay, thank you very much,
Joy. Good morning.
Thank you, Joy, that you can hear us. We are yet to see you on video, but we've gotten your audio very clearly back here. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome. Ndugu Tuko, let's first get there as the stage is being set for Joy to come in.
Well, the question of the contribution of the diaspora in the transformation and development of Africa remains very outstanding. Why do I say so? Number one, the diaspora, for example, lacks a strategic direction. There is no central point for the African people living outside Africa to make a contribution for the transformation of the African people. Take, for example, in Uganda, we have close to about, according to the data in Foreign Affairs, we have close to about 2 million Ugandans living in the diaspora. But these 2 million Ugandans do not have clear strategic direction. They have no leadership. They have no strategic guidance in terms of investments to be made in the country. And yet, in actual sense, this is a great resource that could actually spur economic development in this country. If you look at the figures available with the Ministry of Finance, the contribution of the Ugandan diaspora in 2017-2018 indicates that Uganda received 1.75 billion US dollars. And in around 2019, it was around 1.9 billion. But because of the COVID-19, it dropped to about 1.1 billion US dollars. This is quite a huge amount of money. 6, 7, 8 trillion Uganda shillings invested, brought into the country by the diaspora. But the question is, if this money comes to Uganda, what nature of investments are these people involved in? You'll actually realize that most of this money is eaten by the relatives of the relatives of those that are living in the diaspora. Money is splashed into buying fake land, buying air, because there is no direction, there is no strategic guidance for them. And I think as a country, we must be able to invest money in terms of reaching out to the diaspora and be able to guide them in matters of investments. And if it is possible, register companies that can be able, that are accredited by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that can be able to help the diaspora to invest effectively into the country, in areas of manufacturing, in areas of real estate, and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, at the moment, that does not happen. Individuals have to look for someone to trust and send their money to, either a relative, a friend, or somebody else. And I think as a country, that is not proper. In my view, that happens across other African countries. And I think, to me, these are resources that need to be redirected for the benefit of the country. However, there is a challenge in the diaspora, that sometimes when they live in these European countries, they start imagining that African countries should quickly shoot up to the standards that they are living in. If somebody is living in New York, he thinks that Uganda should also be like in New York in the next 1 week. And I think this is where they go wrong, because even in New York did not reach that level within no time. It was a gradual process for those countries to transform to that direction. You know, some of you have read the history of the U.S. You know what went down there from the time of slave trade up to now. And I think as African countries, we should be able to appreciate, the diaspora should be able to appreciate that we are Africa. We are not the U.S., we are not UK. We are Africa, but we can make Africa better step by step.
Okay.
Yeah.
Joy, come in here and speak to us about that, because you've just heard from us here trying to talk about the diaspora and Africa's development. Now, you live in the UK as an immigration lawyer and social worker back in London. What do you think should be done to see that Ugandans, or all the other Africans, actually not Ugandans, but all the Africans in the diaspora can positively and strategically contribute to the development of this very strong and vanguard continent called Africa? Okay. I think we're still trying to find Joy, wherever she is. Ndugu Mtuta, come in here as we get ready to, as we see how to connect back to Joy.
With the population of about
1.2, 1.3 billion people in Africa. And then we have a very big population outside of Africa. Uganda, we are making about 2 million, like he said. So 2 million in a population of 40%, over 40 is about almost somewhere there about less than 1%, but it's a size of a number. It's a
good number. Now, that compounded throughout the 50 states of Africa, we have a very big population outside Africa. Now, the population outside Africa are people who have a good number who have gone there as students, finally made it in life and stayed there as doctors, as engineers, as lawyers, including the Joys who will be talking to us shortly. Uganda has 3 active chapters. In the UK, we have another chapter in the Nordics, including Iceland, Finland, and Sweden, and Denmark, those countries up there. Then we have another cluster in the US, that is Uganda, the UNA group. And indeed, they have leadership in those chapters. Maybe what needs to be done is how to synergize, to strengthen these chapters, to work together, but also link up with the government back at home. The national policy on diaspora, I think, is still being developed. It's not complete, but Uganda is working on some policy that will cater for diaspora. Diasporas. We already have a desk, I think, in Foreign Affairs that deals with the issues of diaspora, and also you are aware that the government already passed the dual citizenship law, that you can be a Ugandan and also be an American or a British as per that. Now, what needs to be done is to have the consolidation of what happens back at home and how the diaspora chapters can fit into our development. In most cases, there has been a disconnect, and the unfortunate thing, particularly for Africa and Uganda in particular, is that you find that most of the people who are outside Uganda, many of them turn against their own establishments back at home. When you go to some of these capitals, you find that instead of us sitting down to see which problems do we have back at home and which problems can we sort out. I know, for example, the government has been funding some of the activities of the UNA. Every other year they get some funding. That has not been extended to UK. I know the chairman there, Mr. Mutanza, has always been complaining and also trying to find out if government can also fund some of those activities. I find it okay, and sometimes find it questionable, because I think the people who are outside, we need now to focus more on what we can do with the government, more than looking for what government can do for us. But of course, this something that has been said, and if you have done it for one chapter, then it is also only fair that all the chapters are catered for. But we are looking at the diaspora. Basically, the diaspora is supposed to look at issues of entrepreneurship, of business. How do we get the business out there back in Uganda? In fact, the diaspora should be the first contact when we are talking about FDI, the foreign direct investments. Yeah, direct investments. They will be our spokespersons, our salespersons out there, so that because they have the friends, they have they attend most of this business fora that where business is done, and also the issues of now information, the skills that they have acquired. This lady, when she was talking, said we have more Ghanaian doctors in New York than the American doctors, and we have these groups all over the world. So how do we get that skill back at home? They may not necessarily come back at home, but how do we use that skill to contribute to the development back at home? Also need to look at issues of even when we talk, because the biggest thing that comes out is the trying to say that our governments back at home are not democratic because but like you said, we cannot have Uganda growing up like a mushroom. That tomorrow it is ready.
It buds today, tomorrow, the other day you eat it.
Exactly. Even this democratic development also has to be looked at. In fact, we used to think that the European countries, the British and the others are so developed. But of late, we're also realizing that even the democratic development we have been talking about may not be real, that there is something that also needs to be done to have those democracies developing. But you brought up something of the he's the talked about the African capitalism. Last time when I was talking to Dr. Simba, he seemed to be so disappointed with the Pan-African movement, because according to him, he thinks that the Pan-Africanism is dying out in the wake of capitalism. Africans were not known for grabbing from other Africans. They would rather share the little that was there. But this issue of trying to accumulate wealth against the rest is not African. And if we were to have that, then because African is known for communalism, for socialism, that whatever was the little that was there was to be shared amongst the family, amongst the brothers. That's why you have a man, he dies, and then the land which is now there is shared among the children. And we have now people, you don't own the land, but the land is for everyone in the society. But we, in the wake of capitalism now, can we have a form of capitalism which is purely African? Can we mix the two, that we have the African socialism, but also with now a new African capitalism? These are some of the, I think the discussion is that the Africans need to be engaged in. But at the same time, when you look at the contribution that the African diaspora are making, I think we also need to look at that in a context of our history. That most of the Africans who are taken to outside of Africa through slave trade, and others who later on went on their own, have been so cardinal in the promotion of Africanism, but also even the democratic advancement of Africa. Because when you look at the founding fathers of Africa, most of them are products came from the diaspora. But I think there has been a chapter in our history as Africans that we moved away from that into trying to generate what we are calling the local breed of leaders, and has been successful and has been very good. But now that what has also this disorganization, what we call fragmentation of Africa, let alone the partition, but now the fragmentation of Africa, that we have these small huts of ours which we call countries, and then we cannot look at be the brother's keeper, which was the spirit of the Africans anyway, because the morning when you wake up was to find out how your neighbor passed the night, and then you find out if they are okay. Now, when we created these boundaries, these artificial boundaries, I think that's where we are losing the point.
Katie, come in here. We come back to where you are in the US, and of course we talk about the diaspora. Now, you will understand that back on the continent of Africa, we tend to think that the diaspora is comprised of people who run away from their countries for quite a number of reasons, and majority of these run to where you are on political reasons. When they go to the US, they go to Canada, they go to the rest of the world, they go as asylum seekers, purportedly having problems with their own governments back home. And so that briefly also explains what we understand by the diaspora. And when you have a lot of people, like the comrades here are actually saying, fragmented, without a strategic direction, everybody on their own. You go to UK, you do not want another person to know. You move from Ghana, find your way in the United States, then you just definitely get there. You do not want to know what happens to the other Ghanaians who are possibly in the United States. Looking at all those compounded together, how do you see the diaspora coming out to be a vanguard, basing on what Ndugu Akoli has talked about? The 1945 Pan-African Congress, which was actually the 5th Pan-African Congress in Manchester, the hearts, the spirit of that Pan-Africanism was to see a united Africa, was to see a group of, he called them brothers keepers, which seems to have evaded us. What needs to be done, and how should the people back here home understand that those in the diaspora are not just against their own governments, they're not asylum seekers, they're people who go and never want to return home?
This definition, the definition for what we call the diaspora, can have different meanings. I think much of it depends on our level of direct Pan-African engagement. For many Ugandans, they regard the diaspora, as you described, people who have emigrated from the nation for many different reasons. From my perspective, I follow the Peter Tosh definition. If you, no matter where you come from, if you're a black man, if you're a black woman, you are an African. We were pulled unwillingly from our mother continent 400, 500 years ago. I know of no point in my family's lineage where any elder or any qualified authority in my family line ever said, we renounce our Africanness, we renounce our native inheritance of this mother continent, that is our mother continent, and we now announce our loyalty to the enslaving nations. So I would hope my comrades here on the panel would allow the inclusion of over 300 million people of African heritage. There are 22 nations in the Western Hemisphere with majority black populations. Many of them, such as Haiti and Jamaica and many others, have very close bloodline connections to the mother continent. And of course, we came to these places involuntarily. I want to kind of shift my focus, though, of why Uganda wanted me back, and I made my first trip to Uganda this year. I intended to stay 3 weeks. I ended up staying 6 weeks and marrying a Ugandan woman while I was there. But I want to clarify what it is and why you would want us back. So we're talking about diaspora assets and resources, and I made a brief list here. We have technical expertise in all aspects of a modern, developed society, including construction, architecture, engineering, biosciences, and chemistry. We have the potential for significant technology transfer. I've been to the mother continent 8 times, and I'm very proud to say that on 7 of those 8 trips, I have always transferred valuable technology, even if it's on a small scale. But at one point, we donated an entire FM radio station to the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, Ghana. Point 3, extensive healthcare and disease preventative strategies that we have developed. We have extensive experience in media production. Very proud to say, in addition to that FM radio station, I have around the world set up well over a dozen different radio stations, and now we're trying to scale up to agroeconomic projects on a massive scale, which we have already begun with 135-acre development in Western Uganda. But we're also now branching into investing in and installing in African nations renewable energy microgrids for those villages that are difficult to connect to other energy transmission systems. We have the potential for large capital infusion into emerging economies. African Americans have a legacy of over 200 very significant inventions, patents, and this is still ongoing. So we could transfer a lot of those inventions and patents to African countries, because unfortunately in America, despite we have all these very significant patents on items that you would recognize, most definitely, African Americans have failed to secure even one industry based upon our inventions. And we can most certainly do better than that, I think, on the mother continent. Couple more points. Extensive experience managing the world's most sophisticated integrated military operation. High integrity contributions to the arts, music, dance, fashion, fine arts, including the culinary arts. I am myself an award-winning vegan chef. An extensive network of scholars and academics, as well as a spectrum of capabilities to complement the immense abundance of our continental motherland. So I've made another list, and I'll share this a little bit later. I hope you do want to hear it, of what we can actually do. I talked about agribusiness. I talked about media and technology transfer. We're also doing things like student exchange transfers. I am probably one of less than 2% of African Americans who every time I meet a continental African, I will do for them what Africans do to me every time I visited. Will you come to my home for dinner? Let me entertain you for the evening and welcome you, let you know that you are a traveler and that you have news to bring my family, my household, that can improve our lives. We're talking about a paradigm shift in our relationships. I will be back in Uganda in November, and I am eager to make myself known. And the idea, one of the comrades shared that they are now extending dual citizenship to Africans across the diaspora. Well, now that I am married Ugandan and going to be childbirthing Ugandan, I look forward to having my feet planted on 1, 2, maybe 3 or 4 different continents simultaneously.
Still with you, Ndugu Obi, in the US. I will draw you to the late Professor Chika Onyani, a Nigerian-American writer. I've read 2 of his books, The Oracle of the Black Africans in the Diaspora, and another book called The Capitalist Nigger. And talking about just the capitalist nigger, as the comrades have been talking about that, he talks about quite a number of things, the miseducation of the black race. He talks about the misempowerment of the black race. He talks about a people who were designed that when you are where you are in the diaspora, the best thing that you do is not to mash yourselves to develop the continent of Africa, but you tend to just want to pull down another. And that's what describes many Africans in the diaspora. That's according to the late Professor Dr. Chika Onyani, a Nigerian. Just drawing and coming back to you, we have discussed and talked about brain drain, where we think that first and foremost, we were miseducated, as some people of course say. But yet again, you notice that we have quite a number of very skilled human resource that is not building the continent, but it is developing the other part of the world. What needs to be done that our own very brilliant and able brains can actually turn this very rich and naturally endowed continent into a desired place for everybody to be?
There has been a very significant brain drain that's been going on for decades. I do see trends to see that it is reversing itself, especially as nations like Nigeria develop more of their own indigenous resources to wealth. But we've got a long ways to go. One of the biggest contributors to this has been the outflow of capital from the African mother continent. I have a recent book I published called The Blackest Soil: Africa Can Feed the World. And in the book, I documented in great detail how Africa's continental surplus of arable land, totaling some 2.16 billion acres of land, literally could feed the entire world. Yet we have to ask the question, why is Africa at this particular point still a net food importer? And can we utilize specific strategies to reverse this trend and perhaps have Africa rise by the year 2050 as the world's largest food exporter? So I think that there's plenty of room for criticism from within. I think we should maintain the criticism from within. There's been too much outside interference in our relationships. I've had people from the mother continent say when they arrived here as college students or so, they had white people tell them, don't get involved with those African Americans. They're dangerous. They'll only cause you misery, etc. Then when I invite these very same people to my house and feed them a gourmet meal, we realize that both of us have been lied to about the other. I think that the main avenue is Africans across the diaspora, especially this extremely wealthy group of 52.4 million people of African heritage in the United States. That includes 4.173 million immigrants from the Caribbean, South America, Central America, and the mother continent of African heritage. And earlier I mentioned 22 countries with majority black populations just in the Caribbean. Combined around the world, a population of 1.65 billion people of African heritage can truly change the future of the whole planet. Just a couple of points of some specifics of what we can do. Agribusiness, very important for the continent to feed itself first and then export our surplus. To quote the president of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, he said that the next generation of millionaires and billionaires from Africa will be farmers. Well, some of us take that missive very, very seriously. I've been a farmer for 40 years. I grew up to be a farmer, and I look forward to getting back in November and December and getting the crops ready for the next year. Point, healthcare, nutrition, natural health and wellness, and natural health and wellness tourism. Just before I left Uganda, there was a push by the Uganda Tourism Board about selling Uganda to the world and reviving and exciting the tourism industries. I came and we took the most beautiful safari, my second safari on the continent I ever had, most beautiful safari I could ever have imagined in the northern part, from the northern part of Lake Edward to Murchison Falls. This is an absolute fantastic tour. But you know, my wife, who's actually a journalist, they're from Kampala, this is the first time that she had seen the totality of her own nation. And so we've got a long way to go to let the world know you must come, you must see the pearl of Africa. And I'm going to be saying you must also invest. Last point I'll make, and I could go on. Why should Chinese, Japanese, Singaporeans, Malaysians, South Koreans, Indians, Arabs, Europeans, and Westerners, why should they be owning such a large percentage of Uganda's accommodations and tourism facilities? Africans in the diaspora, African Americans included, but Afro-Brits, Africans all across the diaspora, we should be coming in a big way to replace these other groups and build the Africa of our mutual dreams.
Well, thank you so much, Awadu, in the US. We're still together, but let me see if Joy is online. Joy, are you with us?
Yes, please. Hello, good morning.
Very good morning. Thank you so much, Joy, for joining us. And of course, welcome to our Pan-African Friday program on UBC TV here in Uganda, Kampala. I am very sure that you've been following the conversation. Is that so?
Yes, please, I have.
Yes, let's hear from you. Your comments on the diaspora and the development of continent Africa from wherever you are.
Thank you very much. And I just noticed Kate just said everything I'd planned to say today. So I'm going to be very brief. So for me, I understand the diaspora as a community that is living outside their country of origin. So when we leave home, when we leave Africa, we live physically, but not emotionally. We still remain emotionally attached to our countries. And for me, in this case, to Uganda. And I'll just give you an example because, you know, I think it was James who said most of maybe the immigrants in the diaspora, you know, us who are in the diaspora, maybe have come, you know, to Europe because we want to claim asylum. And because of that, we have maybe a negative attitude towards, you know, with development, you know, back home. I studied my degree from Makerere University as a lawyer, and I came here, I did my master's in law, and then I got a work permit. So you could say I was headhunted because I got a work permit here. And then I went on to open a law firm in London. And then I went on to go back again and studied, you know, master's in social work. But I want to tell you that when I was doing my master's, I planned a trip to Uganda, which was like a holiday study trip. And I brought a group of girlfriends from, you know, we were a group of 5 girls. One colleague was from Australia, another one was English, another one from Colombia, and another one was from Italy. And I just said, yes, let's go and volunteer, work with Tasso, you know, in Jinja. Then we had a safari to Lake Mburo. So this is where we are so proud of our country, and we market it when we are here. We talk about it. I liked it when Kate said that actually some of us, you know, when we are back, we don't actually appreciate this nature around us. We don't actually get to visit these parks. But when we get out, we get these new values. of appreciating nature and preserving nature and developing, and we take it back home. So it's not just brain drain, but now somebody says now reversed. We take it back home. So we've had the Uganda Convention here for so many years, and I am aware because, you know, the Vice President and, you know, Honorable Kadaga have been telling us how much we contribute and how much they appreciate our contribution in the development in Uganda, you know, via the money that we send. We don't just send only the money. We send ideas. We send the technical know-how. You know, Katie just said it again about sharing information. When we come here, we study and we share again about values. For example, I'm passionate about the education of girls, and this is something that I model, you know, for young people in Uganda. And when we go back home, we meet up with groups and we share these values. When our people get these values, they stop marrying off their young daughters. We are seeing development. So all we want is to be part of it. I liked when James said, they want to work with us. And we have been saying, we are here. We want to work with you. There is a saying that says that if you want to go first, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. What does that mean? We believe that if we come together, we stop fighting one another, we put our resources in one big pot, and the government in Uganda consults with us, we are going to go very far. You know, I don't know whether I can stop there at this point because I just came in, but that's how passionate I am. And I'm so happy to hear, you know, all this coming from all of you guys in the studio.
As an immigration lawyer, Joy, in the UK, you will notice that Uganda and the rest of the other African countries are lately now battling with issues of human trafficking, where we have many of our young girls. You're lucky you moved to the UK after having achieved the bachelor's in Makerere University School of Law. You went and mastered in the UK. You did another master's, and of course you are there as a skilled professional. Now there are quite many that I know you do interact with in London and elsewhere who run away from Africa, run away from their native countries to just go and find a fortune in the pretext of looking for what they call greener pastures. Now we have so many of these who have had lots of problems in especially the Middle East and quite a number of things. And at the end of the day, you know, when you get into looking into the different documents, of course, we'll talk about how much is brought back into the country from those who are living where you are. But what is this a strategic direction that you in the diaspora should actually have for the development of Africa, as opposed to running away from Africa in the pretext of looking for greener pastures? And maybe to just add on to a young man called Sech Toreko, who is in the news, I know you know about him, who went to Tokyo for the Olympics, and he decided to say, thank God that I'm here now. I do not care. I don't know what Japan has for me, but the best thing for me to do is never to return back home. Let me escape, go and find a fortune. Maybe he was actually told, when you get a chance to move out of Uganda, whatever you do in Japan, don't mind, just escape, go and let Uganda be.
Okay, that's a very interesting analysis. Okay, of course, I've been an immigration lawyer for the last 14 years, and I've worked with trafficked people, and I've worked with economic migrants. I think I'm also an economic migrant because I got a better opportunity here, and I decided to stay. But we should be looking at what makes people leave home and not return back. Because it's okay to come here and study and go back. It's okay to study here and invest in home. But why do people come here and say, I'm not going back home? We should be throwing that question back to our leaders back home. This is what we are looking for. For example, we look at medical care. Families sell land to send their children, to get traffic, people smugglers, to bring them to the UK. And we see people on the water. I'm sure you've watched news. And people die crossing the seas to come to the UK. Why do people put their lives at risk? We should be asking that question. Yes, we have some political asylum seekers, but most of them are economic immigrants. For example, if you're the firstborn in your family, and then there is nothing at all that you have in your family. We look at the medical bills in Uganda, and we are hearing 40 million shillings, for the hospital bill. How many people can afford? We look at unemployment. in Uganda. Last time when we had the Uganda Convention in 2019, before COVID came, we were telling our MPs who normally, thank God, they always come to attend with us here in London. We were telling them, we need more than just class education. We need skills. We need tertiary institutions. As a social worker, this is what we do. I work with teenagers who are looked after. They are normally between 14 and 18 years old. And I can tell you, the UK doesn't just rely on just class teaching. They rely on also skills. And they are actually investing more in skills centers. And I can tell you right here, in London, we thank God for our ambassador. He's really a community man. And when we invite him in our groups, he really comes and attends these meetings and says, I'm here. What information do you want to know about Uganda? It is very good we have the dual citizenship because that gives us some kind of identity with our country, because as much as we have British passports, we also want to be recognized back home. But that has taken us ages because it's like the moment you moved here, you were like a traitor. We want to work with people back home. People like us know why people leave home. You know, we could just have like these kind of meetings and we share these ideas. People leave home because they are hopeless. They don't see whether there is any hope of getting anywhere after school. You know, medical care. We pay for treatment for our people back home, you know. So these are the kind of things that make people think, oh my God, if I get a chance to get there, they give fake documents. They do a lot of wrong stories about Uganda because that's, you know, they're going to get status here. Then now the UK gets this perspective that Uganda is really this terrible place. Then by the time we come back to say, no, actually Uganda is beautiful, they have already got that, you know, ugly narrative about our country. But what is the government doing to keep us back home and return home? These are the kind of things we are looking for.
Just before I come back to studios, I'm still with you, Joy. Another very brief one here. You notice that many Ugandans or many Africans who move over to those countries go in very unorthodox ways. And so when they even get to where they are in the various countries, they never know where the embassies are. They have no details to where the ambassadors or commissioners, high commissioners are. And we just very well know that by just going to London, it's not heaven on earth. It's not a bed of roses. It's not utopia. They get there, and I am sure, and we sure, they have lots of challenges. Now, as an immigration lawyer and also a social worker, what advice would you give to these Ugandans who are now watching you, listening to you, and are going through challenges, and they fold themselves, whatever they are, in very traditional ways?
Thank you very much. This is something we've been to, actually we get meetings here in London as well. We, like, for example, the Uganda Convention is for every Ugandan to attend, where information is shared. And we have small groups again. I'm involved in kingdom groups and all that, where we tell people, please register with your embassy. And our ambassadors told us, we are all ambassadors here. That's what our, Ambassador Mota has told us. We are all ambassadors in the UK for our country. And we always tell our friends, I call our Ugandans our friends, go and register with your embassy. You may get a problem. They may help you. Of course, we know sometimes they get in trouble because they think, oh my God, because I ran from home, because I belong to this party and all that. But when you are here, your embassy should know that you are here. And that's what developed countries do. They want you, if you're going to live in a place for more than 6 months or more than a month, please register with your embassy. They are like your next of kin in the case of any problem. That's why they take you. The Home Office is going to get them as soon as they arrest you if they are looking at deporting you. So for me, I think our embassy is user-friendly in a way that you can go to them for information. You can register there. You know, like some people think you only go to the Uganda High Commission when you want a passport. Our ambassadors always say that it's an open place. They always have events. For example, when we talk about knife crime, they host this kind of events. Our Ugandans don't show up. But when there is a party, when there is a musician coming, they all come. I'll give an example. When we have the Uganda Convention, during the day, information is being shared, and the Ugandans just come at 7 o'clock to dance. So, and these are the kind of things we're sharing, saying, come and we talk about things. But our Ugandans in the diaspora, at least in the UK, they love to attend fun things more than things where they, events where they can share information. But what I have to tell you, we are getting somewhere. We are meeting in small groups according to our tribes, religions, and all that. And we're encouraging Ugandans, get in small groups. COVID has taught us to look out for each other, and has really taught us that you cannot exist alone. And so we are learning to look out for one another. Like James said, it's a process, and we're still teaching our people.
Well, thank you so much. Coming back to studios, gentlemen, you've heard from Joy Chakwita and, of course, Kaidi Awadu in the US. We'll return to them later, but let me come back to studios here. Ndugu Akol, when you look at our founding fathers, in whose footsteps we're trying to imitate or walk through, you notice that their aspirations of Africa are quite different from what we're seeing today. They were forced to go to where they went, and today we actually die and drown in oceans and seas to find our ways running from here. Yet they didn't want to go at the time. But just looking at the continent of Africa, for example, look at its size. 3 times bigger than China, but China is now our solution virtually to everything. When we have economic problems, then China has to come in. When we have social problems, China has to come in. We now talk about a vaccine, and we just seated waiting to see what the rest of the world does. But just look at a country like China, who is 3 times smaller than Africa. What didn't we do right that we need to do right going forward?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Like Council Chakwita has said, I think the issue in Africa is leadership. Not leadership for the sake of it, but a strategic leadership. Yeah, because what happens is actually that people are running away for 3 main reasons, going to the US. For political reasons, asylum seekers. Economic reasons, they have failed to get jobs. They are
Sechito is one of those. Sechito is saying, I have a pregnant wife at home, yes, I have a poor mother at home, why should I go back to Uganda? Let me fend for them from here.
Okay. So economic reasons. Now the other aspect is also social reasons. And social reasons as a result of this education that is not helping us. Your mother and father have sold ideally all the cows and all the land.
To take it to school.
Otuo comes from Teso, he knows that there are no longer cows there. So now they have sold the land. Now they have sold the land to send
but the Otuo's cows were just lost to them. They just disappeared. To rustlers somehow.
Yes. So you are being sent to school by selling land and cows. Now, immediately you've come out of school, your parents, your siblings actually saying, yes, now Jagenda is done with school, he's going to help us. Now you cannot even go back to the village. Not because you don't want, but now you're going to be an embarrassment to your parents. You're going to be an embarrassment to your siblings. So now that makes you socially disconnected from your own people. And therefore, the next thing you'll think of is that, I think, let me go for greener pastures. So I think our governments now really need to look at that. But I'm also happy that some people, as Otoko said, that really, when you look at what comes in from the diaspora, is actually is a very big contribution. But the problem is there is no strategic guidance. The other time the President Yoweri Museveni was saying that save people on VAO from their relatives, and I thought they thought he was joking, because most of these people really are crying. They send money to their relatives to do ABC for them. When they come here, not even a grass-thatched house is in the sight. So that is also now, there is also a disconnect between the people in the diaspora, and I believe now this is an area where people need to invest, that you can come up with a company that is actually there to guide investment. Ndugu Kaid is now married to Uganda, and of course you can say he's a Ugandan by marriage now. He's coming in November. But if they had somebody here, there was no need for him to come. If they had somebody they can trust here, there was no need for him to come, so that by the time he comes, he's just coming to supervise the investments that they are now setting up back home here. So these are realities. So now the other issue is that the people that leave Africa, the picture they paint out there is the people who are running out from trouble. Now, it is totally different from the people who come from the whites, who come to Africa. For the whites who come to Africa, they paint a picture of expatriates. They paint a picture of people who are coming
as investors.
Investors. They paint a picture of people who are coming to help. Even when actually, at times they come when they have more problems than us. But the picture we have is that they are coming to help us. And even when an African, because somebody told me that when you are out there, when there is a small crisis, when they see an African, the first thing they know is that this is a criminal. So they want to know what is the immigration status. That even when you're there in the US, in UK, as a lawyer, as a teacher, as a professional, their mind is that this is the criminal. He has run here for what, whatever. So, and for us, even when we are meeting, you heard of the other German who was actually harassing girls in Kalangala. And it took time for even people to believe, because the picture we have is that these are God-ordained people. They have come to do good. Even when they come here and do funny things, it takes us time to believe. It takes us time to think that they can do that. And even when an African in the diaspora, in the US, in the UK, is doing quite a good job, it also takes time for them to believe that actually that person is doing. So I think the issue, as Councillor Chakwita said, African leaders should really think around the box. How do they make Africa comfortable for Africans to live in? How do they address the issue of unemployment? How do they address the issue of good governance? How do they address the issue of economic transformation?
Okay, gleaning from Councillor Chakwita's submission in there, of course, she had very pertinent issues. Now that she even comes from Uganda, the country that she knows very well, she knows the challenges of going to school here. She knows the challenges of us accessing health facilities. She knows the challenges of the economic challenges that you're talking about. She knows all these things, and these actually these define the rest of Africa. Now, when you look at the helm of the World Trade Organization, the Director General is our own Dr. Nkonjo Ngozi. When you look at the World Health Organization, at its helm, we have Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, and several others. And the issue in here is we talk about economic challenges and issues, but we have, for example, at the World Trade Organization, we have Dr. Ngozi. When it comes to health, we have Dr. Tedros, and this just defines the potential, the prowess, and the capacity of these African sons and daughters. But how do we translate their very good positions? How do we translate their being in these hefty and helm positions into the transformation of a continent of Africa? For example, what would be ideal looking at the pandemic now that has stripped us naked and exposed us to vulnerability of the highest order in as far as health is concerned? We're talking about the economic bit of it, because remember now these two actually are moving in tandem. That the health pandemic of COVID-19 is actually also at the same time killing and affecting our trade and the economy. So we need just to know how, before we even task Chakwita, before we task Awadu, before we task another Semakola in London or Australia, what are we doing at that strategic level? Ndugu Otuko.
Well, I have a different view about these world organizations. These are imperial organizations meant to control Africa. Having Ngozi in the World Trade Organization
and Tedros
in the World Health Organization impacts less on the African continent. Actually, it works well for the imperialists, because Africans will be controlling themselves. You have Ngozi on behalf of the colonialists. So exactly. You have Africans who will be controlling the fellow Africans. In my view, if Africa wants to progress, we must have our own Pan-African organizations. If we had the Pan-African Health Organization and we have Tedros there and making African independent decisions on matters of health, to me, I think Africa would be progressing, because that would show the level of independence of African people and the level of influence that we shall have on our own in the world, because we shall be able to make independent decisions as African people. But allow me to say something to what Councillor Chakwita said about what the ambassador of UK shares with them, that we are all ambassadors
of Uganda.
They are all ambassadors of Uganda. To me, I think it is a good thing for people to understand that East or West, home is best. In African tradition, irrespective of the challenges that you have in your family, you're not meant to let the neighbors know the challenges that you have, unless or otherwise. The unfortunate bit of it is that in African continent today, the first people to blackmail their own countries are the African diaspora. They are the ones who want to paint a monster picture about the African governments, a monster picture. They are the ones who want to tweet the bad roads, the worst kind of case scenarios in Africa. And they are trying to show the world that this is how stupid we are, how bad we are, how useless we are as African people. And I think we think we are doing that in terms of looking for favors from the colonial masters or the neo-colonial masters, but we are actually exposing ourselves as African people and showing how weak we are as a society. And I think unless the diaspora realizes that there is nobody else that can come and build Africa except us who are here in Africa and those that are in the diaspora, then unless we reach that point where the diaspora realizes that they have a role they must play in making a contribution to the development of Africa, we shall be wasting time. Because the diaspora has a role in terms of giving technical advice to the people at home, but most importantly, making direct investments at home. Comrade Kaid was talking about having these foreigners. Why must we have Asians continuing to be part of the people dominating our industrial parks? If we have Ugandans and Africans who have these resources in the diaspora, why can't we see them invest into manufacturing? Why don't we see them start companies of construction companies, so that the companies that are constructing these roads in African countries are no longer Chinese. Yes. They are owned by either Ugandans, Nigerians, Ghanaians, South Africans, so that let this money circulate within Africa. Because there has been this concern of the Chinese companies and their investments repatriating 100% of their monies to their countries and leaving African economies without money. So this can only be solved if the diaspora can actually realize the important role they can play in ensuring that they can impact on their own economies through starting companies that can do construction, that can do manufacturing, so that the industrial sector of African countries is controlled by indigenous African people living abroad. Okay. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. And Ndugu Mtuta, coming here, when countries in Europe decided to come together under their treaty of the EU to form themselves into the European Union. There are certain things that they agreed on or upon, and they saw them being implemented and what's going on. Now, one of the things we're battling with today here, away from the economics of all the things, you notice that the European Medicines Agencies, or the medical agencies, the EMA, decides and says this vaccine will possibly not come to Europe. If you are vaccinated with this jab or that, we don't give you access to our countries. We can only take on people. And today, we have what we call a vaccine hesitancy on the continent of Africa, simply because we are thinking, next year I want to go and meet Chapita in London. But yet again, if I take this particular vaccine, I may not go there. We have that hesitancy. People are thinking, what about if I got this vaccine and the other day I am not given access or permission to enter the US? What falls of me? And these are some of the challenges. Now, you'll notice that until 2019, the African Union had not adopted the African Medicines Agency Treaty. And we're just looking at that. We talk about the diaspora. how do you think the diaspora should help us on managing these things? Because many of the things are discussed amongst ourselves in international forums. We adopt them, we ratify them, and when you do the counting, you notice that we never fulfill these obligations that we get into. What could be happening? Because these should be answering the questions or to the challenges that we're having. Like Chapter says, the healthcare systems, the education systems, the economic, the welfare system, the social meetings, and all the things. She told you, when it's a party, everybody shows up. They go dance and all the things. When it comes to maybe economic development, you don't see people. They come on Ndugum Twitter. I said something before. I crossed back to Chakwita and Awadu.
In 2017, the World Bank, working with the African Union, through what they call the World Bank Open House, they came up with a program on how to involve the diaspora in the development of the respective continent. Now, in this one particular case, Africa, because we have the Asian group also, and others. Now, unlike the other blocks of the world, the African Union, when you look at the agenda on the diaspora, the African Union looks at issues of women and youth, generic actually. They are looking at issues of regional integration, which is good. They are looking at issues of economic cooperation. But you are not looking at issues of technology transfer. You're not looking at the issues of skilling. And to me, this is the area which, if you are talking about health, you are not going to get one or the other and put them together and try to talk about issues of health. We've been talking about African CDCs. Which capacity does African CDC have to be able to negotiate or to develop to the level of the American CDC or the other world systems? So I think there's also a weakness on the African part, and I agree with the some voices that are coming up to say no. I think it's a high time to have an African Union which is out, the leadership of African Union which is outside the normal club of the presidents. Because you have a president, like now we have the President Tshisekedi as the chairperson of the African Union. But can that club of the African heads of state push the African agenda? Or we need another tier which will specifically be reporting to the heads of states when they sit. Say, we gave you ABCD, a commission kind of, that will be able to report to the African heads of state about the progress of Africa. I think that will be okay. Because you have a president who is the chairperson of the African Union, but like we said last time, has similar problems back at home. So he is also operating on a double tier. You have a problem at home, but you also have to face it at the regional level. So that is one thing that to be able to focus the African development and African issues, you need a dedicated specific group of leaders at that level, professional, who will be reporting back to the heads of state. Let the heads of state tier be maybe an apex, but we need people who will be fitting in this. And when you have people who are focused on issues of discussion, issues of negotiations, I think it will help Africa to come up with a more serious team of workers, like he put it. If we have the people just, instead of being at the helm of global bodies representing Africa, what is Africa going to be taking to the World Trade
exactly
group,
a summit or so,
if
whatever.
you are not even trading back at home? These are some of the questions we need to look at. This position should be given to Africa on merit, not as on affirmation, on affirmative action.
Okay.
That you can also be there to show that you are also part of us. No, let's be there when we must be there.
Okay.
Now, when you look at the issues of she put it, the council put it very well, that when you look at the number of professionals that we have out there, I have attended some of, I think most of these have attended the UNA,
their conventions and the conferences,
and I've seen we have very serious people. Now, the unfortunate thing, within this diaspora, we have two groups. We have the type of Council Joy, who have gone there professionally, and they find themselves
they're proud of what
fitting,
of what they're doing and representing the country.
But we have the type of this one who disappeared in Japan. We also have the Sectorical group.
Now, you have a Council Joy,
yes,
and you also have a Sectorical.
Exactly.
In the same country.
In the same countries. That is why when the Council Joys are going for these meetings during the day, the Sectoricals are coming
for dinner
at the dance. So these are some of also the issues of the diaspora that need to be addressed. And thank God that for now, at least seeing from the experience in the UK, these Ugandans are no longer sending money to you and me. At least there are agencies that are working through to have their properties protected here. They are buying their houses through a number of companies, and they're also investing through a number of products through the banks that they are getting.
We just have 10 minutes to close this down, and we'll share these minutes equitably. Coming to KD Awadu in the US, in just about 2.5 minutes, speak to us about this, that we have a very big population on the continent of Africa, but it is a continent, or it is a very whooping majority that is considered as a market for fake, a market for counterfeit, and a market for substandard goods. Just on that particular note, what do you think needs to be done? Because we look at our continent as a dumping ground for every fake and counterfeit or substandard material. I talked about Professor Chika Onyiani, and in his book, The Capitalist Nigger, he talks about Africa as a continent of consumers and not producers. What do we need to do, gleaning from some your experience as those living in diaspora? Professor, I beg your pardon, Ndugu Awadu as a researcher, finally.
Yes, making it quick, so many points to go. I look forward to future conversations. I think primarily we need to focus on certain key areas. Number one, overcoming the impact of our negative historical patterns, to include the impact of colonialism, the present state of neocolonialism, and what I have predicted we can avoid is a nouveau colonialism, where we're going to see these corporations coming in and capturing our healthcare systems, capturing our systems of governance by declaring what we would do indigenously as undemocratic, and they need to put their substitute in. There are a couple of very key critical points that I want to point out. For one, I love Uganda. As a researcher, I've investigated the entire world. I love Uganda for a number of reasons. We know it is the pearl of Africa. Agriculturally, Uganda can be one of the most outstanding performers in the international economy. Uganda has the second youngest population of any nation on the world after Niger. And we have to understand that this youthful population represents what is called the demographic dividend. And I think all Africans around the planet must prepare the best pathway possible for these children to inherit what should be the greatest empire to exist in world history. So, a couple of points that I think can take us there. I am engaging in remittances to the continent. I'm doing the best I can to convince more of my African diaspora-born brothers and sisters to send remittances. Even micro-lending can go a long way in the hands. We want to build upon solid frameworks. So much of what I am doing is around the framework of Agenda 2063, and that includes, of course, advancing the self-interests of women and girls across the continent without losing our essential soul and turning the African woman into just a chocolate-covered version of her European feminist, not so much a counterpart. I'm working hard to forward the strategic plan to federate the regional economic communities, beginning with the impending federation of the East African community, which could form at least the 9th largest nation in the world. And of course, Many of you know that the DRC and Ethiopia have applied to join the East African community. So that federation now changes the whole global picture. There is so much for us to be excited about. I'm not going to put any energy into anything negative. I'm just saying to my sister and to my brothers, I am so honored that I found you. We have found our family in a peaceful, progressive, sustainable development place. Let's get this party started.
Thank you very much, Awadu. In November, when you come to Uganda, by the grace of God, we'll have you here. We'll host you here, and we just pray that God preserves and keeps you, and that when you cross over to Uganda, we'll be very honored and grateful to again host you and have a cup of coffee in studios with you here when you come.
Looking forward to it. And I'm going to bring a number of my books with me as also, and make sure that you are all well aware of the plans, the strategic plans we've formulated over these years.
Thank you very much. Joy, coming back to you. How do we transform the eloquence? How do we transform the abilities to speak and to make speeches in conferences and to do lots of these things wherever we go in international forums to turn them into the benefit of African development? Joy, finally, in just 2.5 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. Like they say, information is power and knowledge is power. We need to reach out to our people and let them know what is going on. They need some of them need assurance. Some of them just don't know what is going on. And sometimes when we have meetings and then we have a few people and then we say, okay, we know Ugandans can't meet in big groups when we are discussing serious matters, but if we can go and meet now our friends, and somebody said at the beginning of this meeting that you need to be your brother's keeper. How do you do that? By finding out, what are you doing? How can I help you? For example, if, for example, I have a following, maybe on LinkedIn of over 5,000 people, give me whatever it is. I post it on there. It helps to widen your market, and I'm helping my brother to get somewhere. For example, there is somebody who has opened up what we call a mobile shop called Duka, where they import things from they import things from Uganda, Bamatoka, and all those beautiful foods that we have in Uganda. And then they just move with the van and then they deliver at home. It's amazing. And when you share that information, you're helping your brother to get more customers, but we are also marketing a Ugandan product. And now those guys in Uganda who are growing it are having that assured market. And I love the fact that East Africa is expanding. The bigger, the better, like I said at the beginning. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I believe that if we keep talking about it, it will get there, because we have good intentions. One thing that I have to tell you is that we have very many educated Ugandans in Europe. And when we have some of these fun meetings, you see them, they attend. We only need to tweak and say, please, let's look home. What can you do? What can you share? I remember the president one time told us, what are you going to, the president told us, you come together and tell us how you want us to help you. But I agree, at the moment, some of us are quite disorganized. But if we keep talking about it, we all have good intentions, because what happens home affects us directly. All we need from our government is to involve us. We cannot be spending money home and we're not part of the system. We need to fit in the system. We shall only do that if we have this kind of meetings. If we use, for example, our Uganda House as a source, for bringing us together. I believe we have good intentions, and I'm so proud to be part of this group.
Well, I want to thank you so much. Thank you so much, Joy Chakwita from London. We really appreciate and thank you so much for giving us your time and, of course, for being with us. We'll continue engaging. Greet all the Chakwitas, because I think I know the Chakwita family, and I know that you come from the Chakwita family. Greetings, all the Chakwitas. Greet all the Chakwitas there, for I know that they also know me. Blessings, and thank you, Joy.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. Joy Chakwita is an immigration lawyer and a social worker in London. Ndugu Akol. We have just 2 minutes to share amongst ourselves, just to say our final remarks in these 2 minutes, and we get out of studios.
Well, thank you very much. You know, one of the Pan-African slogans is don't agonize, organize. So the Africans in the diaspora, don't agonize, organize.
Yes, there
are a lot of opportunities for the diaspora people to continue impacting on the lives and the economy in Uganda. they simply need to, as Comrade Akola said, simply organize and be able to come home, invest in education, tourism, construction, and so many others. There are a lot of opportunities here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matuta, finally?
Two issues came up. Nani was talking about the vaccines. We did not go much talking about
into the vaccines.
Into the vaccines, but there will be time when we can.
No, we'll organize and come back.
With
the
professionals.
Kedi would also be very good to engage on the issue of vaccines, because now that's the way to go. That's what everybody
exactly,
of us
because
is,
many Ugandans would think maybe we have dodged that technically. Yeah, but we have not dodged it. We know it will come up. Then the other thing is that we may have to extend this show until up to next week, because the number of issues that also need to be looked at. Many Ugandans would want to know, like Joy was saying, that you are in London, what happens when you have a problem, and you are in US, how do you come together? So the number of issues when it comes to diaspora, I think we can have some time for that.
Yes, just we beg and we request that we can actually allow to continue this conversation with Joy and Katie, and maybe even get to others, because Uganda is also developing its own vaccine. We're trying to see that. We've seen that happen in Cuba, where they've developed their own Abdallah vaccine. Uganda is one of the only, I think it's the only African country that is so far doing that. But the rest of us, of course, are waiting. The African Union the other day say they're trying to get at least some number of doses to just cover for about 10 or 20% of the continent. And you ask questions that, yes, if you talk about 10%, still begging, but of course to serve only 10 or 20% of the continent, then you ask, where is the rest of the 90 or 80% of the African continent? We will get experts, and I will try to get the other scientific experts also onto the show here to talk about these issues. But thank you so much, Kedi Awadu from the US, a researcher, and thank you so much, lawyer Counsel Chakwite Joy from London, and to, of course, our producer, the floor managers, and everybody, the technical team, for making our Pan-African Friday a very successful one today. For God and my country, my name is Jagen Asemakola Ziksoka. Blessings until Friday next week. Bye-bye. Thank you.